We begin the Gemara on Daf Vav Amud Aleph. I have 7 lines from the top. The first word on the line is kol. The Gemara here is speaking about making a tzion, a marker for a place where there's tumah, so people should know not to go there if they want to remain toy. Omer Rav Yehuda said, Motza even mitzuyenes. If you find a stone and it has a marker on it, in those times they would put some sid, some lime on it, so people should see that it's tamei. Tachtea tamei. So only beneath it, right there, is tamei. Rashi here points out, even though the Gemara earlier said that when you put a tzion, you don't put it exactly on the place of the tumah. You have to put it a little bit further away, so a person shouldn't come to walk on the place of the tumah, and then it's too late when he discovers this sign. But nevertheless, if you have an even, which is higher up and people could see it, so over then you can put the marker even on the place of the tumah itself. Shtayim, so if you have 2 stones that had a marker on it, Im yesh sid beinayim, so if this lime that they put there is also between these 2 stones, then beinayim tamei. So not only on the stones where it has this siman is it tamei, but also between them is also going to be tamei. But vim ein sid beinayim, you have these 2 stones that have the lime on it, but between them there is no marker at all, so then beinayim tar, between them will be tar. Sagt the gefragte Gemara, va'afal gav de leke chayrish. Are you going to say that between these 2 stones, when there's no marker, it's going to be tied, even if they did not plow ever in between them? Could you rely on this to say that there's no tumah, there's no kavet in between them? It's very logical to say that if you have 2 stones, and on each one there's a siman that for tumah, that probably between them there's also tumah. The Gemara here brings a braisa which says this. Vatanya, we learned in a braisa, Motza even achas mitzuyenes. You find 1 stone that has a marker on it of tumah, so tachtet tumah. Beneath that stone, you know this tumah. Shtayim. If you have 2 stones, so then im yesh chayrish beinayim. If you see that someone once plowed between these 2 stones, so then beinayim tar. So then I know that in between is tar, because even if there was any tumah there, it was already plowed over. And then there's no tumah of oil over there once you plowed over it, so there's no tumah in between. Ve'im lav, if no one ever plowed in between these stones, so then beinayim tameh. Because I have a marker on one side and on the other side, so the area in between is probably also tameh. So how could you say that if there's that always between these stones, it's always going to be tameh? It's always going to be tahir, that is. So Rav Papa answers, Hacha, in this braisa, what is it speaking about? Keshahasid shafuch al resheyen, when the lime that's there as a marker was spilled, was you see it on top of the stones, but also merude lekan lekan. But the marker is not only on the stones, but it's also spreading out from here to there. You see it spilled out further than just the stones itself. So therefore, in this case, what you have to figure out is, why is there more of a marker than just on the stones itself? You see that there's more of here in between. So if you see that someone came and plowed in between, so then you say beinayim tar. In between it's going to be tar. Because then you say the only reason why you're seeing more of the lime in between them that spilled out is because someone came there in between and he plowed there, so it got peeled off from this plow that came in between. It's because of this plow that came in between that the siman that was supposed to be only on the stones got peeled off. But if there was no plow that ever came in between these 2 stones, and you see that there's more than just on the stones itself, there's more in between. So so really what you're seeing is that there's supposed to be here more lime for in between these 2 stones, and therefore v'tamei. And therefore in such a case it's tamei. So basically Rav Papa's answer is, when you have 2 stones and you have the siman only on the stones itself, then in between it's always going to be tar. But if you have on the stones and you see it spilled out a little bit more on the sides of the stones, so then it's going to depend if there was a plow that came in between or not. Ravasi said, regarding if you have an area, if you have a field, let's say, so metzer echad mitzuyan, if you have just 1 fence of this field that has a marker on it. So who tamei? So over there, where that marker is, that fence of the field, over there it's tamei. The rest of the entire field is all tar. Shnayim, if 2 of the fences of this field have a marker on it, so heim tmeim. So those 2 of the fences are going to be tamei. The rest of the field is all tar. Shloisha, if you have 3 markers on 3 sides and 3 of the fences of the field, tmeim, so the heim tmeim, so they are going to be tamei. And the rest of the field is all tar. Arba, if all four sides of the field, all four fences have a marker on it, so then hein tahayrin v'chol asada kula tameya. So then you know that the fences themselves, beneath the fences themselves, no one was buried there, and they are tahir. And you're just marking off the entire field. That's why you made the marker around the entire field, so all the field is tameh. So the logic behind this is because, as we said before, ein marchikin tzion mimokim tumah. You're not supposed to make the marker of a place of tumah too far away. Shalei lahafsid es Eretz Yisrael. In order not to come and ruin the whole area in Eretz Yisrael, that you should have places that you think you're not allowed to go there, but you really are allowed to go there. So therefore, over here in this case, if only one fence is marked, so then I say that mistama, it's just that location. We're not going to make the entire field tameh. If you put the marker just by that fence, it's just there. But if you see it all around, so then it's logical to say that he's trying to fence off the entire field. So then it's the interior of the field that's tameh, but not the area of the fences themselves. Okay, this is the conclusion of this subject, b'negeh to making a marker for a tumah, which was brought up in the Mishnah, b'negeh to chalamayid, that in chalamayid you can go out and make these markers. And then the Mishnah said, v'yotzin af ala klayim. Then in chalamayid you also go out to inspect the fields to see if there's klayim there. Fragt the Gemara, v'kalayim b'chayla shamayid nafkinon. On chalamayid, this is the time when the Bezdin sent out messengers to see if there's klayim in the field. I'll ask you a question on this. We learned in another Mishnah where it says, Be'echod ba'adar mashmiyin ala shkolim. On Ish Chodesh Adar, the Bezdin lets people know that you have to bring shkolim. And also v'ala kalayim, that they should go and see that there should be no kalayim in their fields. And then the Mishnah says, B'chamisha asabay, on the 15th day of Adar, Kairins na Megillah. That's when you read the Megillah. That's the Megillah that you read in the walled cities. Be'krachim. V'yotzin l'kavitzes adrachim. They go out to take away the thorns from the field, to clear from the ways, that is, from the roadways, to make sure people can travel. And l'saken arachayvis, and b'chlal, to fix all the roadways. And v'lomad ha-mikvais, to measure the water in the mikvais, to make sure that there's enough water and you have kosher mikvahs. And v'oisim kol tzarchei rabbim, they do all the other needs for the rabbim on this day. U'mitzayin es ha-kvarais, and they also went out to make a marker for the kvarais on this day. And also v'yotzin ala klayim, on Tezvav Adar they went out to check the fields to see if there's klayim there. So we see that this was already done in other times. So why is it saying here that in Cholamayid they're coming into the fields to check for klayim? So the Gemara Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yosi Bar Chanina, they both gave an answer for this, two different answers. Chadama, one said Kan bebochir, that in Tesvav Adar they went out to see those things that already grow earlier in the season, and Kan ba'afil. Over here in Cholamayid there are things that are delayed in the season later on that grow only later, and they could only see then if there's going to be klayim or not, so they went out in Cholamayid. Another said, a similar answer, Kan bizrayim, when you speak about the grain that grows in the field, so it comes earlier so they could see then if there's klayim or not. And Kan biyerakis, here we're talking about a vegetable garden that only grows later in the season, so they come out in Cholamayid and Pesach. So in connection to this, Ravasi said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, B'chlal, b'negeh to these dates, whether it's Tezvav Adar, whether it's in Cholamayid, Lo yishanu, this that we gave these dates, it was only said, Ela she'ein nitzan niker, because you don't see the blossom noticed until these dates, so you don't go out until then to check if there's klayim or not. Avol nitzan niker, but if it's already blossoming from before, so yotzin alein, you go out even earlier. You don't have to wait until Tezvav Adar or until Cholamayid, you can go out when it already begins blossoming. Okay, we understand that there are two dates here. Tezvav Adar, or later on when it starts growing. But why up is Dafka Cholamayid? Why not some other time in the month of Nisan? Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, so he explained as follows. Mishum schar pu'ula, it's because of the payment that you're paying for the workers, for the shluchim of the Bezdin to go out into the field. The Maizli Gaban, that on Cholamayid it's cheaper for us to pay them than any other time in the month when everyone is busy working. You have to hire workers for this, you're going to have to pay them full price. Cholamayid, most people are not working then. So it's cheaper to find workers, and therefore we want to pay them a cheaper price. So Shma Mina, from here, from this that you're saying, that we're looking to pay a cheaper price, so what do I see from this? That Ki Yavina Luhu Schar, when we pay these shluchim of the Bezdin to go and inspect the fields for klayim, who's paying them? Where's the money coming from? Vitrumas halishka yavina luhu. This is money that comes from the shkolim that there is in the lishka in the Beis Hamikdash, that it comes from hektish, that we're paying these shluchim of the Bezdin to inspect for klayim. If you're going to say that it's not from Trumas Halishka, it's not from the Machzas HaShekel, but rather all the field owners, they have to pay the bezin, they have to pay the shluchim of the bezin for these shluchim that are coming into their field to inspect the kalaim. They have to pay for it, not the Trumas Halishka. If so then my nafkalon minayu. So why are we being so careful about this to make sure that we're getting them in a time where we can pay the cheapest price? Kol kamed the boy litin luhu. Whatever again, whatever the price for this work is, let them pay for this. Why should we be so particular to get a cheaper price? Elamai, it must be that because we're getting the money from hektish, so therefore we don't want to pay any extra money from the hektish, so therefore we do it in cholamayid, we can get a cheaper price. Huh? Okay, true, b'chlal, but especially when you get to hektish, you want to use the money of hektish in the time when it's the cheapest. So the Gemara va'at kamo, and now when you have the kalaim in the field, so how much kalaim is there in the field that the bezdin says that you have to take out this kalaim? Amar Shmuel bar Yitzchak ka'isel shesheninu. So this is like this, that it says that we learned in the Mishnah. This is in the Masechta Kalaim. Kol sa. If you have a sa'ah, an area in your field which is one sa'ah, which I believe is 6 kav, that's what a sa'ah is made up of. And in that area you have a quarter of a kav of a different kind of zera, that's kalayim, that's growing there, so then you mayit. You have to take it out. You have to take out that roiva hakav. Again, it's a quarter of a kav within a sa'ah, and each sa'ah is 6 kav, which means it's one of 24 that of something else that's growing there in that area, so then you have to take it out. So what we just said is that the shluchim of the bezin came into the field, and then when they saw things that were growing there, they were klayim. So what did they do? They would have to take it out. But Vatanya, we learned in the Braisa, or Vatnan, we learned in the Mishnah, Hiskinu, there was a takana. What did they say? What did the shluchim of the bezin do when they saw kalaim in a field? Shiur mafkirin kol asada kula. They would make the entire field hefker. Because they found kalaim there, the person wasn't careful and he allowed kalaim to be in his field, they made the whole field hefker. So how could you say yemayit, that all they did was they just took out the kalaim? Answers the Gemara like kasha. This is not a question. Kan kaidim takana, kan la'achar takana. Before the takana, they would take out the kalaim and they would leave the field for the person. And after they made a takana, then that if they discover kalaim in your field, they're going to be mafkir your entire field. The Tanya is we learned in the Braisa. What happened? What is showing in the beginning? How you oikrin, the shluchim of the bezin came and they found kalaim in your field, so they would uproot the kalaim. And they threw whatever kalaim there was, they left it there for the behemoths, for the person who had behemoths, that the behemoths could eat from this kalaim. So the field owners had two reasons to be happy about this service they got here. Achas, one is that you're weeding their fields. It helps, that improves the growth in their fields. And that they're also providing food for their animals to be able to eat. So then they made a takana, that the bezin that came, so they pulled out the kalayim and mashlichan al adrachim. They threw away this kalayim onto the roads, onto the roadways, not for the behemoths to eat. But vaday, yismeichen simcha gedela shemenachshen, so they say it. They were still happy for this free service that they're getting from the bezin, and as we just learned, who paid for this? They didn't pay for it. It came from the Trumas Halishka, and they were weeding their fields for them. So Skinu, after this, they made the takana shiur mafkirin kol asada kula. That if Bezdin discovers climb in your field, they made your entire field hefker. So anyone could come into your field and take whatever they want. So that was the takana eventually, and therefore people stopped and people made sure they shouldn't have kalaim in their fields.
So besides there is a hefshe ma'uba,
they had to do it during Cholamayit. Okay. Sagt Heilige Mishnah, Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov Omer. We had this Mishnah quoted before, but again, we're going back to the halachas of watering the fields on Cholamayit. So Meishchen Samayim me'ilon le'ilon. On Cholamayit, you're allowed to bring the water from one tree to another, but you're not allowed to water the entire field where there are trees growing there. So because this is an orchard where it relies really on rainwater. This is what's called in the beginning of the Masechta a Beis HaBaal, and it does not need irrigation of water every single day. But the trees themselves do need water, so you can draw water from one tree to another, but not to water the entire field. Zrayim, if you have plants in your field, that you do not water them before Yom Tiv. In other words, this is a field that it doesn't need water all the time. So you didn't water them right before Yom Tiv. Lo yashkim b'mayit. So just like before Yom Tiv, you don't water them constantly, and it could survive without having water constantly. So on Chalamayit as well, you don't water the field. Chachamim matirim b'zeh b'zeh. Regarding both of these cases, Chachamim say it's allowed. You're allowed to give water for your entire orchard. You're allowed to give water for fields even that you didn't water them before Yom Tiv. Rashi says this Chachamim here is Rab Meir in the beginning of the Masechta that disagrees with all the distinctions we made, all the limitations. That it's only an irrigated field that you're allowed to give water to, not a field that relies on rainwater and so on. He disagrees with all of that. Even to do work in Chalamayit that's not for a davar of it, not for a loss that might happen, it's also allowed. That's Chachamim's opinion. So the Gemara, Rav Yehuda said, if you have a field that's very, very moist, mitunenes, the source of this word means like tit, it's like cement which is very moist, and you have a field that's a very, very moist field, so then if you're not going to water it and it's going to dry up, it could cause a loss to this field. Mutter, such a kind of field that has to be very moist, you're allowed to water it in Chalamayit. Tanya Nami Hachi, we learned similar to this also in Abraise. So it says there that when it said in the Mishnah that you're not allowed to water the field on Chalamayid, so this is a field that you did not water right before Yom Tiv, so it doesn't need the water before Yom Tiv, so it doesn't need it on Yom Tiv either. On Chalamayid that is. But if it's a field that you did water right before Yom Tiv, it needs the water all the time. So then so then you're allowed to water it in Chalamayid as well. Like the rule we said before, a beis hashlachin that needs the irrigation all the time, so then you can water it on Yom Tov as well. If this is a very moist field, you have to keep it very moist, then mutter, you're allowed to water it in Chalamayid as well. Another thing this Braisa says, mashkin sedei girid b'mayid. You're not allowed to water a field that's very, very dry on Chalamayid, because if it's so dry, so then the fact that you're going to give it water now, it's not going to cause it to take away a financial loss. It's already very, very dry. The Chachamim atirin b'zeh b'zeh. And Chachamim allow, Rashi says, whether it's a very dry field and whether it's a field that you did not water right before Yom Tiv, either way, you're allowed to water it on Yom Tiv itself. Again, the basis of Chachamim's opinion is not only a davara of it, even something that just brings you more of a benefit that the field will grow now, you're allowed to do on Yom Tov, on Chalamayit. So the Gemara, Ravine said, Shma Mino, from here I could learn out, Sahai Tarbitze, so when you have a vegetable garden, Shari Litarbutzi B'chol Demayeda, you're allowed to sprinkle water on it in Chalamayit. So Tarbutzi is not mamish watering it heavily. You're just sprinkling water on it that the vegetables that are growing there should grow a little bit better. So Shma Mina, so you prove this from where? So according to the simple pshat of the Gemara, it's proving it from what the Chachamim said. Since the Chachamim were matter bezeh, that even a dry field and even a place where you don't usually water it before Yom Tov, you're allowed to water it. So this vegetable garden, even though l'chayre doesn't need this water, but nevertheless you're allowed to sprinkle water on it on Chalamayid as well. That's Rashi's pshat. But Taisus over here says that the Shema Mino actually refers even according to the first opinion in this Braisa, or even according to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov that argues, that says that you're not allowed to water the fields in Chalamayid if you don't need it, if it's just for extra, that it should grow better. But this Tarbitze, because you're just sprinkling water over it, so this is something that's allowed to be done in Chalamayid because it's not you're not watering it heavily. So here this is allowed to be done in Chalamayid. Sdei Girid, when you have a very dry field, my timer. What's the reason? So the Gemara explains. This is the part of the Shema Mino. What's the reason why by a Sdei Girid, a dry field? What's the reason why you're not allowed to water it in Chalamayid? The Afle Mashvile Charfa, because this very dry field, whatever is growing there, it's going to take a long time until it's going to grow because it's very dry. And by you sprinkling or by you watering it, so it's going to grow quicker. Right? So that's what you're accomplishing by this dry field, and that Chachamim said is allowed. Hochanami. So over here, when you sprinkle water over this garden, this vegetable garden, so afla mashvila charfa. So this vegetable garden, by sprinkling water over it, it's going to grow, and it's not going to be any hefsid here, but it grows slow, and now it's going to grow quicker. It's going to become ripe quicker, and therefore this is allowed. So like I mentioned, Tosfos says that this is allowed not only according to the Chachamim. The Gemara is bringing a raya from what the Chachamim said. So the simple pshat of the Gemara is that it's a raya according to the Chachamim's opinion. But Tosfos says that it's a raya even according to the Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov that you're allowed to sprinkle water over a vegetable garden on Chol HaMoed. Tan Rabbanon and Abraisa we learned marbitzins they love them b'shvius. That in Shemitah you're allowed to sprinkle water in a stay lavam, which is a grain field, and avaloi b'mayit. But in Chol HaMoed you're not allowed to sprinkle water on a field of grain. The Gemara Badvat Tanya, another Braisa we learned marbitzin. You could sprinkle water bein b'mayit, bein b'shvius. On a grain field, both in Chol HaMoed and in Shemitah, you're allowed to sprinkle water of it. Omer Ravona. So Ravona explains, like Hashia, there's no contradiction here. Ho Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. The Braisa that says that you're not allowed, there's Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov that holds that only if there's a financial loss are you allowed. And Ho Rabbana, the Braisa that says that you're allowed both in Chol HaMoed and on Shemitah, goes according to the Rabbanan that say that it's allowed on Chol HaMoed because he doesn't, even if it's not a financial loss, it's allowed in Chol HaMoed. Tanya Idach, then there's a third Braisa that says, Marbitzins they love on Erev Shvius. You're allowed to sprinkle water over your grain field right before Shemitah, Kedei sheyetzi yerakos b'Shvius. In order that it should grow, or if it's vegetables, it should grow in Shemitah. V'lo yoid, and an even more so a bigger chiddush, El Shamar Bitzins they love them b'Shvius. You're allowed to sprinkle water over your field on Shemitah, Kedei sheyetzi yerakos l'matzah Shvius. In order that the vegetables should grow after Shemitah. But you're not allowed to sprinkle your field during Shemitah in order for it to grow on Shemitah itself. So here it returns again to the halachas of Chol HaMoed. What kind of work could you do in your field on Chol HaMoed? So the Mishnah says, Tzadin esa ishus, you're allowed to capture ishus, which we'll see in the Gemara refers to, I believe, a bat. Is that how they translate it there? No? Just says ishus, okay, because we'll see in the Gemara. The Gemara will ask, what's this ishus? Vesoach barem, and rats or mice in the field. Mizdeya ilon, so you're allowed to go and trap them, these different rodents in the field that are ruining your field. Mizdeya ilon, this is an orchard, or Mizdeya lavan, or from a grain field. Kedarka, the way you usually do it, b'mayit, you can do this in Chol HaMoed, and also b'shvius, during Shemitah. The Chachamim say, Mizdeya ilon kedarka. In Asdeya Ilan, where they create more damage, over there you can trap them the way you usually do. Or Mizdeya Lavan, in a grain field, Shaloi Kedarka. You have to do it in a different way than you usually do it, not in the regular way, because they don't cause so much damage in a grain field. Yeah. Another thing regarding the work you do in a field, then in Chol HaMoed, you're allowed to fix a fence of the field during Chol HaMoed. But you're not allowed to build the entire fence from scratch. On Shemitah, you're allowed to build a fence for your field the way you would usually build it the entire fence. Even though l'chayre Shemitah is a time when the field is hefker, but nevertheless you're allowed to build a wall because it's not it's your field, it's still your field, and you're allowed to build a wall around it. So the Gemara, my ishus. What is this ishus that said in the Mishnah? Omer Rav Yehuda berei. It says Rav Yehuda. Omer Rav Yehuda. So Rav Yehuda said, "Berye she'ein lo einayim." It's this creature that has no eyes. So again, I believe it's a bat. Is that how they translate it there? No, they don't say. Okay, that's maybe yeah, maybe not. Or a mole. Okay. Amar Rav bar Yishmael v'teimer Rav Yemer bar Shalmiya Maikra. Where in the pasuk do you see this ishus? It says in the pasuk in Tilim, K'mashablul Temes Yahaloich, and then the end of the pasuk is Neifel Eishes Balchazu Shomesh. This Eishes, which is this creature we're speaking about here, Balchazu Shomesh, it doesn't see the sun. It's blind, and this is what causes damage in the field. Tan Rabbanan na Braisa we learn Tzadin es ishus v'soachbarim is lavan. You could trap this ishus and the achbarim, the mice that are in the field, in a grain field, and also in an orchard, kedarka, the way you usually do during the year. Umachriven, another thing is, if you have an issue with ants, you have an infestation of ants in your field, and they're causing damage in your fields, machriven chayrin amalim. You could also destroy the holes of the ants that are in your field. And the Braisa explains how this is done. Keitzad machrivin. How do you get rid of the ants in your field? Rab Shimon Gamliel says, Mevi ochfar mechor zeh v'naisen l'toich chor zeh. You take, there's two ant holes, and you have to take the earth. And Rashi in one Rashi here says you take the earth and the ants of another ant hole and you bring it into this ant hole here. And what happens? And then they're going to strangle one another, huh? Yeah, they're gonna kill one another and they're gonna choke one another and they're gonna die there. Rashi explains, because the reason is the ants only know and they're familiar with the earth that they live in and they smell the place that they're in and that's where they live. But if you bring from a different earth, and also if you bring along the other nemalim, the other ants into this place, they don't recognize the earth there and they choke each other and they die. But now the Gemara explains how you do this. From which earth do you have to bring? This only works if you bring earth from another side of a river. Then the ants in this place won't recognize the smell of this earth that you brought from another side, that they weren't there b'chlal. And that's only if you don't have a bridge that the ants could cross it. And also, that the earth was on another side. You brought the earth from a different side of the river, and there's no bridge there. And who the leke gamla, and also you don't even have a board going across the river. And who the leke matzre, and you also don't even have any rope, anything going across that connects the two sides of the river. And if another thing, at kama, how far do you have to go to bring from this earth? At parsa. You have to bring earth from a different place, from a parsa away. Even if it's on the other side of the river, it's not going to help. It has to be on another side of the river where there's no bridge, no way to get over. And it has to be a parsa away. If you bring that earth and you place it over here into this ant hole, it's going to kill the ants over here. So the reason why the Gemara is saying all these details is to point out the tircha that's involved in this. And even though you have this tircha involved, you're still allowed to do this in Chol Hamoed since they're ruining your field.